And today's gratuitous food shot is shoyu ramen. Sunshine, flowers, long hot summers, and surprisingly sunny winters. It's not the best country in the whole wide world for solar panels, but here in Japan I would definitely say they're worth it. Especially if electricity prices keep spiking as they did a few weeks ago. You know, one of my friends told me his electricity bill in January was $5,000 yen. That's $450 plus for one guy, for 1 month. And yes, that was a bit of a freak spike in the prices, but it may well become the norm before too long. I would say if you have a house in Japan, solar panels will potentially make a lot of sense. If, of course, you can make them affordable. Now, as I said in the last video, I absolutely love those traditional Japanese roofs made of ornate roof tiles, kawara in Japanese, but sadly I didn't manage to find a house in Tokyo in my price range that included such a lovely old roof. Too bad. I guess I should mention that those lovely old roofs are not fashionable. Young Japanese people just don't want them, and there are actually companies who will get rid of them for you. There's a market for that. It makes my heart ache, it really does. Anyway, while there's nothing actually wrong with the roofs on this house, they are plain. The lower roof is metal, while the upper roof is plastic imitation tiles, presumably over metal. And that's fine, you know, they're all nice and durable, but not beautiful like those ones on traditional minka are. That said, there are two silver linings to this cloud. First, kawara are extremely heavy, so in an earthquake-prone country where the structures are wooden, they're often, you know, actually not the best idea in the world in terms of safety. A lot of the houses you see collapse in the country's famously frequent earthquakes are the ones with the heavy tiles on the roofs. And secondly, well, large expanses of not particularly pretty roof that get decent amounts of sun are a great place for solar panels. I've been thinking about getting panels, you know, pretty much since I moved in. You know, there were so many times when I was in my garden and the sun was shining and I just thought, why, this is the perfect weather for solar panels. And so I started to dabble with small scale solar. I have these teeny tiny panels that power these lights and the little fountains in my pond. I even got this little solar wallet. You know, you charge it up and then it's a little battery bank for your phone. It's a bit dusty. But yeah, solar panels are an ever-improving technology that's, broadly speaking, you know, pretty good for the planet, rare earth metals debate notwithstanding, and you know, they offer some protection against the problems that can happen if the grid goes down, as it sometimes does here after typhoons and such, and you know, they're pretty fun to learn about. So I started to think bigger. It did actually take me a while to decide to really take the plunge. I don't actually have a south-facing roof, which here in Japan, which is in the northern hemisphere, that would have been optimal. But my usage is heavily skewed towards the afternoon anyway, so putting them on a west-facing roof seemed fine. I actually almost went ahead with a traditional system in the autumn of 2018. I'd made quite a few £1,000 on the growth of Bitcoin at that point, and I actually went into a big camera with a plan of getting the roof covered in panels. Big camera even accepts payment in Bitcoin, although apparently it's not a very well executed system. I spoke with a sales assistant who told me they'd need to send someone over here to assess the building and figure out the suitability of the roof and all kinds of complicated things, and well, basically it seemed too difficult to deal with in Japanese, and I wasn't sure I would want to stay in the country the 12 odd years it would take for me to break even at that point. So I backed out. Besides, at that point I was thinking, I might miss out on even more crypto gains. FOMO is a powerful thing. Then a few months later, the drop in value of Bitcoin and the fact that I'd shorted a bit too early with leverage and lost quite a lot meant that my poor old cryptocurrencies weren't going to pay for a solar panel system outright anymore. Then I became hopeful again when this idealistic fellow contacted me to introduce a company in Japan operating on what's called a TPO model. And what does TPO stand for? Total, Pants and Obfuscation. No, not really. It's a third-party ownership, which basically means that the company puts the panels on your roof at their expense and then they get all the proceeds, but they subsidize a bit of your electricity bill, and then after 10 years the ownership gets transferred to you, so you get them for free basically. And they bombard you with this feel-good material about how much better this will be for the planet and how your carbon footprint will be reduced and so forth. It all sounded alright, but you don't really get anything for 10 years, and you don't know what's going to need replacing then when you're given this 10-year-old system. Chances are high that the inverters will at the very least. In most cases, whether or not you still live in the same house will be a question mark too, and then in the end it was all just pointless conjecture anyway, because they looked at my roof on Google Maps, decided they could only get like 3.5 kilowatts or something like that, and that it therefore wasn't worth bothering. So much for saving the planet, huh? The next possibility was a system I saw on Kickstarter from a company called Legion Solar. And what was interesting about them was that they had this very simple DIY system with a limiter so that it never feeds anything back to the grid. So I considered that for a long time, but the prices always seemed a little bit high for what they were offering for DIY, especially factoring in postage, and there were some complaints about delayed delivery and various things. You had to upgrade quite a lot to get a decently sized system, but I was still heavily considering it. But then I saw on a Facebook group about home renovations that someone else had put together a DIY system of their own using very similar components to the ones that Legion offered, but sourced separately here in Japan. So he introduced me to these blue boxes, very familiar to anyone in the DIY solar scene, I'm sure. These are inverters which also have limiters, which ensures the power stays only on the home side. Nothing is fed into the grid. So the problem with hooking a DIY system that doesn't have a limiter up to your house in general is that it feeds power back into the grid, and then if there's a blackout and people are working on the wires, there's a potential for them to get shocked. With this system though, not only does nothing get fed back that way, but if the grid goes down, everything just turns off anyway. The only downside for me is that each box is only capable of up to 1 kilowatt hour. And of course, if you generate too much, none of it is going back into the grid and paid for, so it's just wasted. Still, since the startup costs would be low of doing it in this DIY manner, Japan's feed-in tariff, that is, what you get paid for your extra generation, that's getting super low, and the cost of power is going up and up. I decided to go with it, go with DIY. After just thinking about this for years, it was finally time to just go ahead and do it!
Just do it!
Okay, step one then was to buy panels and get them up on the roof. And while the lovely gent that I'd contacted through that Facebook group was happy to help me set up with the electrical part and advise me on what to buy, I couldn't really expect him to go climbing about on roofs for me. That part was my responsibility, especially if I was going to cheap out and not use safety harnesses or anything. Really dumb thing to do. Don't do that. Now initially I wanted to get all of the panels up on the highest roof. Higher is obviously better for getting sun, and the lower roof gets shaded in the late afternoon by the apartment buildings next door. But the panels that I ordered from the remarkably cheap Japanese site Solar Off were just too huge and unwieldy for me to safely get them up there. These are some pretty big boys. So I decided to attach them to my lower roof in an east-west arrangement. The best part of this was that with a little ingenuity, the parts of the roof that I actually had to drill down into to attach the panels were actually parts that had additional protection from rain and were unlikely to lead to leaks after I applied some sealant. Okay, well, as you can see, the first one has now been attached to my roof. Hopefully not too amateurishly. Yay! Okay, that's 2 done. Now I have to decide whether I put the third one down here or over there. I'm thinking over there. This side gets the morning sun, which isn't as useful to me. Here I'm getting sunshine in the afternoon, but it quickly gets blocked by this tall building over here, which is why I'm going to put more panels on my upper roof, which is up here, and that's going to get much more afternoon sun. I spent a long while preparing, finding out how panels work, how to connect them in parallel and wire them up, and eventually I ran cables down so that they were outside the kitchen wall where the fuse box is. And then the cables run down here. I just hope that's long enough to connect them to my breaker box. So the wires weren't quite long enough to go all the way around as they were, so I ended up doing this, passing the wires through the gutter. It's not really ideal, but I couldn't get them to tuck behind it. And, well, I've sealed everything up, but, well, it's a bodge job. I covered each wire with some conduit for extra protection because, I don't like the idea of things getting rained on. So I got out there this morning and I made sure all of the cables were covered in some conduit. Hello, cat. I'm on a higher roof than you, cat. NANI? Since then, it's rained many times with no signs of leaks or issues with the wires, so yeah, nice. Not long after, I found out that the way the inverter limits the amount of power being generated is through using a split core transformer, which basically clamps onto the wires that are bringing electricity into the house and reads how much is passing through, then adapts with that information. But the power coming into the house here in Japan is in 2 phases, and each split core transformer only reads one of them. So while that was slightly annoying to figure out in the beginning, it actually meant that I could just get another box for the other phase and then hook that up with some smaller panels that I could put on the top roof, right? Yeah, so I ordered a second inverter. I didn't want to spend too much more on panels, so the first thing I tried was to get some cheap flexible panels that are mostly used on RVs and similar. That was mostly because they're very light and I thought it would be easy to get them up onto the top roof, but it was also because I saw some on AliExpress that were 300 watts. Wowee, 300 watts in a single light flexible panel. That's so cheap for that wattage. So I ordered some without doing due diligence, and when they came they were suspiciously compact for 300 watt panels, and then I actually looked at the voltage and the amperage, and it's not hard to calculate that, well, I got ripped off. Well, not totally. I mean, the price is still alright for 120 watt panels, which is, I guess, what they were, but yeah, 300 watts was a definite AliExpress stretch. At first I set them up on the lower roof, but I always intended to expand. I've put them down here, resting on a piece of wood that I'm going to secure a bit better later on, and yeah, they shouldn't get shaded. Flexible panels also probably just won't last all that long, and I might not get such amazing results for them, but at least they're super easy to put into place. So easy in fact that I decided to get a whole bunch of other small flexible panels that sell on AliExpress for like $20 each. And yeah, you get what you pay for, but I figured I might as well. So I got 2 more cute little panels. They're only 50 watts each. But if I put these in series,
then their voltage pretty much exactly matches those big solid panels I have on the lower roof, and they're pretty tiny, so they'll be very easy to fix to the roof. I like that they have to specify that you need to take off the protective film, because yeah, judging by how people in Japan use screen protectors for their phones, this is pretty much an acceptable level of transparency for them, I would say. Alright, let's get this taken off, and then I'll need to use a voltmeter just to make sure everything's wired correctly. Apparently there are quite a lot of incidences in panels in Japan and from China, especially cheap ones, where the positive and negative have for some reason been reversed. Just something that's worth checking. And there they are.
Since that meant that I had working systems though, it was finally time for David from the Facebook group to come and help me hook everything up. He's an electrician, and if you do this yourself, I'll say this: it's really a good idea to get someone who knows what they're doing to help you with the part where your inverters are connected to your house's breaker box, and also to the panels themselves, just to check things are working. He did a great job, and I am eternally grateful for all the help and advice he provided. Did me a solid, I tell ya. But at the same time, I am pretty proud that I managed to do everything else myself. And when everything was all set up, we had power. Alright, David's gone now, but everything's been set up and it's functioning. I'm going to have to wait till tomorrow to see how well the panels perform, because it's already getting to the stage where we're losing the light a bit. But I'm pretty happy with everything being set up. At the moment I've only got the flexible panels set up on this second phase, and so far the performance looks pretty atrocious. Next step is tidying up these cables.
Alright, the panels are up and running. As you see, they're making about 500 watts right now, or a little bit below now. But that's mostly because that's all the power I'm actually using. You can see from the grid it's drawing about 20 watts. So basically it's offsetting almost all of my use. So that's perfect, really. Meanwhile, the flexible panels are pretty useless. I've got them on a phase that's only using about 50 watts anyway. But yeah, I was hoping for more than 20 watts at best. Something must be going wrong there, so I guess I'll try and figure things out when I have the tools to do so. The fan on these things does get a little noisy, I must say.
So when you're generating power, it's nice to keep tabs on it, of course, and there's an app for that. The inverter sends a signal over Wi-Fi, and then you can use an app and website to monitor it. Although it wasn't the easiest to set up.
The app doesn't seem to like to work very much. Let's see if it's different this time. 100% fail! So for the life of me, I can't get the app to connect to the Wi-Fi function of this inverter slash limiter. But I found some instructions in Dutch that show me how to connect it simply to Wi-Fi, and then I can look at the information on the website, and it seems to be working. Okay, so we've connected directly, and we now go to 10.10.100.254 for whatever reason. Log in with admin and admin. So we can go to wizard, connect there, and that's basically it. We'll be done. Let's check our plants. The logger is connected now, so it should update and we'll have everything on the website. The other one that I did before is showing connection, so yeah, looks like we'll be ready to see some details once the sun is out, because it's not anymore. Okay, looks like it updates the app for you anyway if you connect by computer. So as you can see, we set the panels up pretty late in the day and ended up with a princely sum of 10 yen's worth of solar power. Oh yeah, well, it's a start.
With the system, you need to think about a 1 kilowatt upper limit per phase, plus of course figure out what voltage that your combined panels will reach. Now this doesn't necessarily mean you need to limit your panels to exactly 1 kilowatt, because depending on placement and efficiency and angles, it's unlikely that you'll get 100% of what's advertised as output. When I came to realize this, that's why I eventually got a fourth big panel to add to the rest on my lower roof.
Alright, so even on really good sunny days, I'm still only getting about a maximum of 700 watts. So I've decided to overpanel and add one more big one.
Then once you have your panels, you need some way to secure them firmly in place, using at the very least Z brackets, or Z brackets if you prefer, but typically using some kind of rail mounting system. Then of course you need enough cabling to reach your inverter, and if those cables are going to be exposed to the elements, you really should use some kind of conduit to help mitigate weather damage.
Adding conduit, adding conduit.
If you'll be putting anything in parallel, which you very likely will be, you will also need some parallel connectors. Now, with everything up and running, those flexible panels obviously weren't doing so great.
Okay, so I've swapped some of the breakers onto different phases, and now there's more of a load on the flexible panels. Now they're producing about 81 watts, which is only about half the load that's on them.
So I decided to get 6 fairly cheap, fairly lightweight 100 watt glass panels with a voltage that matched those of the flexible panels. And using those and the cheap flexible panels I'd also got, I greatly expanded what's up on that upper roof. Of course, getting them fixed up there means climbing up to a height that, you really don't want to fall from. But still, that's what I did.
Alright, we're finally ready to finish up the big system on the top roof. Are you impressed, fishies? My original plan was to kind of split them between east and west, but I was forgetting that I'm going to put 3 in series, so that would mean the wattage would be super low all the time, because at least one panel would be mostly shaded. But that does mean I'm going to have to clamber up out here in order to spread them out all facing west. Should be fun. Alright, so the task is to get these up there. I'm going to have 6 small glass 100 watt panels up there. Alright, so I've done the first 3 panels up here on my top roof. There's some tidying up to do. This red cable over here is temporary. That's supposed to go up to the next set of panels, but I haven't got the shorter one delivered yet. But it'll work for now. Up here is where I always wanted to get the panels, because they get much more sun, especially in the afternoon, which is when I use the most power. But obviously, yeah, it's a lot harder to lug panels all the way up here. Alright, so today's task is to get some panels on the very uppermost roof. Kind of means I have to do some climbing on the top there, which I'm a little bit worried about. Should really wear a safety harness, but I'm going to take the risk. Don't do as I do. Alright, so this is me done for today. Added all 3 glass panels and a bunch of cheap crap flexible ones. There's a loose wire or 2, and I need to add a lot more conduit to the bare PV wires. But yeah, I'm going to add another small layer of larger flexible panels down there. As you can see, I'm no longer particularly worried about walking up on this top roof here. Though if you do this, kids, wear a safety harness. I'm just going to put about 9 more rubbish, cheap $20 Alibaba panels up here on the top roof, just for that little extra boost. I took some elbow grease, some trial and error, but those are all up there now. Let's go see how much extra wattage these 3 are netting me. Breaking some records today, over 700 for the first time. This one around 650. It was a little higher than that before, but that's pretty good. This is making me think more and more that batteries might be a good idea though, but they're just so expensive.
Storage is easily the most expensive thing you can add to a solar setup at the moment. Batteries cost a lot. But I'm still heavily considering buying a really nice, big, powerful battery that can keep an aircon running through the night, because yeah, on sunny days I do make more power than I can use. Much more sometimes if I'm not using air conditioning. Thing is though, a good large battery will set you back well over $1,000, and that's if you get a good Kickstarter early bird style price, What I did get though are 3 smaller batteries, or solar generators as they somewhat confusingly call them. There's this little guy that's actually currently powering that ring light that's lighting me up right now. 32 watt hours, there we go. It's a basic 296 watt hour lithium ion battery, which is nice and straightforward, but will degrade faster than the others. Then I've also got this medium-sized 384 watt hour lithium ion phosphate, or LiFePO4 battery, which charges very slowly, but should stay healthy after being cycled many times.
Then there's this big boy, the 1.2 kilowatt hour lithium ion NMC battery, the single most expensive element of my system. So has all this had an impact? Okay, here's what I'd say is pretty much an average month. I have months that I use much more power and months that I use significantly less as well, but this is for an August. So you see that I used about 299 kilowatt hours that month, or a little under 10 kilowatt hours a day. So that's quite a lot, but usefully we can also see the figure here for Zenin. So that's last year, which was 533 kilowatt hours, way more. Now obviously I can't say I used exactly the same amount of power during my daily life this year as opposed to last year, but if anything I think I use more power now, working remotely and providing more heating for the pets, although this was August so it would probably be cooling for the pets. Let's look at a winter bill too, because heating is expensive and I haven't added insulation to the house yet. Plus I've been running a 300 watt pond heater constantly this year. So in January we used almost 700 kilowatt hours, whereas last year it was over 900. So there's clearly an impact, even if it's definitely not reducing my bills to nothing just yet. But of course, better insulation during this renovation should help a lot with that.
So I guess one caveat to the whole saving the planet narrative is that when my house is generating power passively, I feel like I should really be using more of the power. And so my use of electrical items increases. Well, hopefully after renovation, a well-insulated home won't need nearly as much power to keep us comfortable. But then I might just feel that I can heat or cool more of it instead of just limiting it to 1 or 2 rooms, you know. So the net benefit to the planet may not actually be that high. Still, this was a great learning experience. It will definitely help keep costs down in the future when prices are sure to keep on rising. But most importantly, it was a lot of fun to do. Okay, that's all I have to say about that. See you guys again next time. Bye!